Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're in YouTube, you'll see a little link down below. You can click and you'll end up in Zoom. If you're in Zoom, you'll see a little link down below that you can click on and you'll end up in Mukana. And that's where you can ask questions, chat with others, vote on questions. Now, if you think you can answer some of the questions, we'd love to have you actually on the panel. Basically, this is a group that keeps on getting smarter as we add more people to it. So if you have a vertical of something that you do on a daily basis, you probably have something to add to what we're doing. So we'd love to have you. Just got to get here at 6:40 a.m. Pacific Standard Time to do the mic check. You can get here as early as 6 a.m. and that's a good place to tech. Now we're just going to chit chat until people show up and raise their hand and say, "Hey, I need to test my system." And but that's what the time is for. So feel free to jump in, even if we're talking. We're just filling time between checks. So that's our tech time there. Of course, the first hour is all general discussion, anything you'd want to talk about around virtual or media production. Second hour is usually something that we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today we're gonna finish up our AWS sessions, and we have had 4, and the first 3 have been amazing. I expect no less of today. So we're gonna have a great second hour. Tomorrow we have education as the second and third hour. Then Nick Jushchyshyn is going to start the Unreal Engine, and there was a link that went out that that you can get a kind of an overview of where to download things, and that went out in our morning broadcast. So Nick Jushchyshyn is going to be walking us through building a basic virtual set inside of Unreal over the next 4 weeks on Saturdays. So 10 to 11:30. This is going to be a mixture of a little bit of Q&A, a little bit of demo, and a lot of us working together on figuring it out. We're going to test a new platform at 11:30 with Michael Ball. There's something we've been kind of fiddling with. And then at 5 o'clock, we are going to at 5 o'clock, we're going to do a little cooking together. So 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, if you're interested. Whatever you want to cook. There's no recipe on this one. Next week, we'll have a recipe. This one, we're actually going to just play around with the idea of cameras in the kitchen and what that looks like and showing what we're doing. So figure out something that you might want to do. This is getting ready for us to participate in Mad in the Kitchen's live streams. And so we're just kind of figuring things out this week. So next week, the following week, just know that we may move that meal time to an earlier time. And also we are going to do another Raspberry Pi build, just to see if anyone wants to follow up. So just so you know, we'll send that out in tomorrow's list. But it's basically the Raspberry Pi 4. Is that right, Jonas? And we can. Yeah, and we'll put it into Mukana today too, just so you have it right now. But we'll have it in the links tomorrow. And I dropped 2 things out of that. Also, the cooking meeting, which will be separate, will go out tomorrow morning's broadcast. I'll also put it into Mukana in just a few minutes. And so anyway, that's it. Bill, you ready for questions?
We're all set. First one comes from Brian Carpenter in Cleveland, Ohio, and he says, what should be the budget to upgrade from a Brio to a Blackmagic for only work-from-home live conferencing? Camera, 35mm 1.8-ish lens, captured a laptop dummy battery or a power supply, no need for the ATEM. Am I missing some kit parts in that list?
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, the budget for that is round about 3,000, I would say. But I would get the ATEM. You will even the basic ATEM, when you have that connected to your Blackmagic camera, it's quite magical. It makes it a lot easier to adjust. I would definitely recommend getting the ATEM with the camera.
Yeah, being able to shade the camera is a big deal. So, I mean, it is, I would definitely, at a minimum, have what's happened to a lot of us, I'm just going to warn you, is that we got the ATEM Mini, and we got the ATEM Mini Pro, and then a lot of us jumped to the extreme ISO because you just want as much as you can get. So, you just have to, if you don't have that budget, get the Mini. You'll be fine. You'll be able to do everything you need to do. You'll be able to shade the camera. There's no reason to go any further than that. If you have available budget to go to the extreme in the first step, you're just saving a bunch of in between steps that will happen, because you'll fill up those inputs pretty quickly with new things that you want to do. I filled mine up I thought I'm going to have a ton of extra spaces, and I filled it all up in minutes. Roscoe?
4K might be enough. You might not need the 6K. You don't need the dummy battery because it comes with an AC adapter. And it says only for work at home for this purpose. But I would get the dummy battery if you're going to take it in the field. It'll save you a lot of batteries.
And I would, I will say that you'll look better with the 6K because it's better low light performance, and also the depth of field will be shorter. So you'll actually look better for the amount of the cost increase. It's probably worth, getting the 6K again if you can afford it. The 4K looks amazing. So it's not, I think Liberty, you're on a 4K, right? And so you can see the 4K looks great. So, but Liberty makes it look good. But you may want to, the 6K sometimes you may find that you want to 35 millimeter if you have Canon lenses already, or Canon lenses, or you have a little bit more choices there as well. So, all right, let's jump into the next question.
Doug Ferguson from the panel here in Fort Wayne, Indiana says installing Zoom rooms on a PC changes some system settings. Uninstalling does not change those back. Which ones got changed? Does anybody know?
I'm not sure which ones got changed. I know on my Mac, a couple of things got changed around. There was some Zoom room options around breakout rooms that definitely got flipped back when I upgraded in this last upgrade. So I'm not sure exactly why, but it definitely occurred. Go ahead, Rupert.
On a PC, I'm pretty sure during the installation process, it gives you a checklist of the things it's going to change. I know for sure one of them is like the power plan, it goes to max performance, screensaver timeout, things like that. But I think there's a list when you go through the installation process, so you can make a note of that for when you need to do the uninstall.
Yep. Go ahead, Peter. I can't hear you, Peter. Still can't hear you. You're muted in Zoom. There you go.
Just to clarify more specifically, that I'm asking is like the Windows update settings. Like there's some setting in there that got changed that is now not letting Windows updates happen. And I just
that's amazing. How do you use that all the
we
time?
All want that. We all want that.
That is the definition of not a feature, but I mean not a bug, but a feature. Oh my gosh!
Well,
like it just.
So everybody.
So now that I found my mouse again. What I was going to say is, when I did it, the first thing I do when I do changes like that is I make a full backup, so I know what I'm going to fall back to, and just. Right. Restore. If I want to fall back, I restore over.
I still want to know how Doug was able to pull off the no update for the Windows machines. I mean,
we need to get Steve. We need to get Steve Gibson in. I'm sure he could tell you.
Amazing. Yeah, it's so great. It's the worst part of that operating system. Rupert.
Yeah, that'll be in some kind of registry setting through like a group policy. Probably Google that and find out what to put back there.
It's, Jeffrey. And then Jonas, and then we'll move on.
Yeah,
real quick.
The two don't really mix to like that. So the only thing I can think of is maybe the update servers were down at that point in time of the day. So I'd give it another try.
And Jonas?
So the Zoom Room does change the update settings. That is a feature of it. Check for the installer. In the support pages, there is a list of all settings you can set, and there's a setting what it changes, and then you can check how to make that back, so you at least have a list of what was changed.
Next question.
Rupert McRae here on the panel from Dallas, Texas says standing desks for video calls, thoughts or experiences?
Paul, Bill, and then Chris relatively quickly, and then we'll come back to Ken.
A uplift desk right here in Austin, Texas makes a great line of desks. I've got one right here, and if you get it, be sure to get the hammock accessory. This is my friend Laura at South by Southwest, hanging underneath an uplift desk. Okay. There you go.
All right, Bill, and then Chris.
I'm not a big, so just as somebody who shoots a lot of people, particularly a lot of executives, we've had them do stand-ups where they're literally standing. And when I get a fidgeter, I always try to encourage them to sit down, because you tend to move your axis less if you're sitting than if you're standing. If you're standing, you tend to be more mobile and it's hard to follow. So I would go with a wider shot if you're going to use somebody in a standing position, just how it's worked out for me.
Go ahead, Chris.
I totally agree with Bill. What we end up doing is quite often putting people in portrait boxes and then they're bobbing out of frame. So I'd prefer people to sit down regardless of the health issues of it.
Well, and a lot of people have this, an opinion that they have more energy when they stand. The problem is that energy usually comes with exactly what you're talking about, which is moving around. And so on a video, if you don't have a professional on the other side that's following you, and even when you do, if you look at the very most well-trained, and I wouldn't say the best, but most well-trained, you're either trained or you're not trained, right? And so the most well-trained speakers will, in their talk, will know how to go to a mark. You'll see X's on the stage, and that is their mark, 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 mark. And what they'll do is they'll know that I'm going to go to this mark to make this point, and I'm going to go to this mark to make this point. And between those, as I'm talking about something that's less important, that has less impact, I will walk, and that creates the feeling like I'm covering the stage and talking to different people. The reason that you have marks and the reason that you stop is so that your camera operators in an event can zoom in on head and shoulders. So when you move, they'll back up and do waist up, which is less impactful. And so, so the very most well-trained speakers will always have marks, and you'll see them not wandering around, not pacing, but literally once you get good at knowing what you're looking at, you'll go, oh, what they're saying right now because they're walking. It's kind of contextual. It's kind of funny. It's kind of something else. It's not the point that I really care about, because you don't pace when you talk about things that you care about. You stop and you look out at the audience, you give them a moment to breathe, and you give the cameras a moment to go in, and then you're going to get a much, much better impact of what you're about to say, if it's important. If nothing's important, keep pacing. Ken?
Oh, well, that's going to change my view on what I was going to say, because if standing is so thing. But then one thing, if you do have a standing desk, whoops. Okay, sorry.
Make sure the camera is mounted to the desk.
I thought you were trying to illustrate. You're illustrating? Yeah, make sure the cameras. It is great to. I mean, what Ken is showing is the importance of not having the camera connected to the desk, so you don't have movement and shaking and everything else. That's great. Jonas and then Carl, pretty quick.
Yeah, I wanted to say the same. Like I have a standing desk and I have two positions, but then I have to reposition lights and the camera and stuff. That's the hard part.
Yep. Carl, real quick, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, I've done some work with some CEOs, and the thing that I found that is you give them a bar stool, so it's a tall stool that has a footrest and no back, they will actually sit up straight and not move too much. So a tall stool, footrest, no back, that's the thing I found best.
Just make sure it doesn't swivel.
Yep. Next question.
Moving on, Paul Wallace, Austin, Texas. Could we do a series of workshops on how to do a show where we help our panelists tweak their shows and give them ruthless reviews, much like we did with Sky?
Yeah, absolutely. We just got to pick the shows. So if you have a show you want to do that for, we'll work on some show reviews. It's probably one show that we might review. So let's figure out where we can manage that in Discord, and we'll figure it out. Next question.
Rupert McCrae of Dallas, Texas says, is there a tangible difference between using 5500K lighting with camera set to 5500 or 3000K lighting with camera set to 3000K, assuming a controlled environment, not having to match other light sources?
Go ahead, Carl, and then Roscoe.
Okay, so as far as if you've got daylight bulbs, set your camera to daylight, it depends what other light may be leaking in. So if you've got window light coming in,
he's saying he's got control. He's got full control over it. The question is that all things equal, is it
your reds? So if you're using a Sony camera, your reds will go to orange if you're using 3200. So that's one thing you just want to be careful of. So color science and Sony they shift more red outside of daylight, so they don't like to too much. They go orange.
Interesting. Roscoe. Yeah, Roscoe. And then
one thing that we often overlook is the makeup. It really depends. If the person's wearing makeup, they have to wear makeup for the right color temperatures. And something that black people especially, you have to put some more reflective on them. And black people tend to look better in 3200.
Mickey?
Yeah, a lot of earlier digital sensors were a lot more, had a lot more noise in the bluer spectrum. So earlier sensors, manufacturers typically recommended that you light the scene with daylight if possible. because then you're putting in a lot more blue light in which the sensors weren't as sensitive to. Nowadays, it's not so necessary to do that, but a lot of old school DPs still prefer to light it with daylight and put an orange filter if needed on the camera.
Rupert?
They're all good answers, all interesting stuff. Is there any opinions on how all that relates to maybe the Brio specifically?
In general, we have not found a huge difference in, I mean, we've been lighting, because we deal with daylight a lot, some windows somewhere, we're having to process that. Generally, we're lighting for 5600. I mean, we go 5600 about 95% of the time, but that mostly deals because there's some environmental lighting somewhere. And then what happened for a long time is we had to choose a color. We don't have to choose colors very often anymore. We have bicolor lights, but because we had to choose it, most of our lights were 5600 because those were the ones that we used the most. I've used the Brios in both 56 and 32. I feel like the Brios look better at 56. 56 bulbs and 56. I feel like for some reason their light is cleaner, in my opinion. Next question.
Tony Mobley of Newman, Georgia, our friend, says, is there any production value in using sidecar apps, the sidecar app maybe with Mac and iPad? If so, maybe 2 use cases.
So 2 use cases for the sidecar. Well, one of them is Felipe's here, right? Is he here? Yeah. Don't you use sidecar for teleprompt or for
I do.
Teratron?
I'm using it right now.
Yep. So there's one.
It's great. And you can also use a little application for our Xcode to flip it, that screen. So for example, right now I can actually read your name properly.
Right. And are you and you're connected via USB-C?
I am. It tends to be a little bit more stable than just Wi-Fi.
Right. Very good.
What app do you use to flip the sidecar?
It needs to be on the same iCloud account on both devices, the Mac and the iPad. You have to have Bluetooth and Wi-Fi switched on.
And what app is it that you're using to flip it?
I found it online. I can send a link to you guys on Mukana in a few minutes.
Okay, sounds good. Great. Bill, and then Jesse.
I've found that it's perfect for editing on a train. Back when I used to take the train to Los Angeles a lot, having sidecar and a connection wired with my MacBook let me have the same 2-monitor arrangement that I work at with my desk that was extremely mobile.
Jesse?
Use it for ATEM control touch panel, touchscreen.
How is it controlling the ATEM with a touchscreen?
Well, it's a second screen, so that it's basically like extended desktop. So you just put your ATEM control panel over there.
Oh, I see. And we've seen some people using large touchscreens for their ATEM controls, and it just seems like a lot of mistakes could be made there. So that's the only, like in a real show, I go, ooh, I don't know if that'll work really well, especially when you start getting like a 2ME or something like that. Go ahead, Felipe.
Yeah, just one thought about that. The controlling ATEM, you would need to use the pencil, not the fingers.
Right. Yeah. Next question.
Tim Holm of San Lorenzo says recommendations for interfacing Heil's PR40 to a computer for USB, and possibly a second recommendation to bring it directly into an ATEM Mini Extreme ISO.
Go ahead, Ken.
I tried a number of different mixers for the Heil, and that none of them were, because the Heil needs a lot of gain. None of them worked. As was testament to Mickey on office hours. So the Mix Pre was the only thing that can easily control it and has tons more gain than it needs.
Go ahead, Peter, and then Mickey.
I was going to say the Mix Pre will do it. I use a Mix Pre 3M, and it will do both actually, because it can actually do, 1/8 inch out, and that will go straight into the ATEM Mini. Make sure you set it to line in on the ATEM Mini Extreme. So your choice. You can either go USB to your computer, which is what I typically do, but I can move it to 1/8 inch, TRS over to the ATEM and do it that way as well.
Good,
But
Mickey,
make
and
sure
then-
you set it to, there's a setting in the ATEM controls to set it to line in.
Right.
Mic in
Absolutely.
does not work.
Yeah. Mickey, and then Carl.
Yeah, essentially any USB, any mixer with a USB connection and also an unbalanced connection will work. Although the PR40 is relatively gain hungry, so if it's an affordable mixer with relatively affordable preamps in it, you might need like something like a Triton Fathead or a Cloud Lifter in the chain.
Go ahead, Carl, and then we'll move on.
So if you have something that's a dynamic microphone that's quite low, Apogee Electronics, they do make desktop ones that are under $1,000. They will go up to 80 decibel plus. So Apogee Electronics, they're a premier brand, but they do make desktop versions that are quite cheap.
Next question.
Jeff Francis, Columbia, South Carolina. I successfully changed streaming encoders from one hardware device to another in the middle of a live YouTube stream. On a scale of no problem, I do that all the time, to horribly bad idea, never do that. How bad an idea was it to change those encoders?
It depends on what was one going into the primary and the other one going into the backup, or is it just swapping one while in the show?
Yeah, it was an emergency because I lost access to a playback machine. A remote was running the entire thing remote, so I remotely stopped the hardware encoder and started my ATEM Mini Pro here at my house to do the playback, just with the same stream key.
Yeah, go ahead, Jonas.
I have done that. I had a show where I switched through, I think, 4 encoders because everything kept failing. I think the way you done it's actually better if you know the show is down to use the same stream key, because the switching to the second one takes about 30 seconds if you have no luck, and then it's not really clear when it switches back to the normal feed. So yeah.
So
I mean, it's an emergency. You probably save the stream that way, and doing it on the main stream key is actually what I have found is better than doing it via switching.
So I definitely wouldn't change the stream key. You have a whole bunch of people they're not gonna. You don't want to send them to a new event. That's going to be disastrous. This is where a backup encode comes in useful. Even if you were doing it from home, keeping something that was here's the challenge with it, with the backup. Just see the thing that is unknown to most with YouTube. YouTube makes a decision about the decision about going from the primary to the backup is not made at the server level. It's made at the player level. And why that's important is that the player says, oh, I'm not getting bits the way I want them. I'm just going to switch to the backup. So at any given time, you may have 20, 30, 40, 50% of the viewers on your backup. So if you do a backup stream, the big mistake people make is not treating the backup stream like a primary stream, because it really is another primary stream. It is definitely important to, one of the things that's important with that is I would always fill the backup stream with even if you're taking it from the same encoder. Well, you can't do it from the same encoder, but if you send it up to AWS or whatever, you could send it out. And this is, by the way, where, streaming to AWS as an in-between would have saved a little bit of trouble on your end, because you'd be able to keep on sending something, out, while you're figuring stuff out. But or restream or other things like that. One thing to do is think about emergency slides that say, hey, we'll be right back. You can push that emergency slide, wait until you see it in YouTube, and then cut the stream, because YouTube's going to keep showing is going to keep on spiraling on the last frame that it had. So you can get it up there so that people know that that there's something happening. Then they'll see it turning, but it'll be sitting on that frame. Then when it gets the next thing in, it won't hurt the stream. YouTube's, you can stop and start ingests. It's just that there's that big delay, looks bad. Like no one knows what to do. A lot of people leave. There's a whole bunch of things that happen in that space that you want to kind of figure out. But this is where a lot of us try to figure out a way to have a primary that's using a completely different pipeline to get out, so that we can it'll just swap over if it has a problem with it. But to your point, I mean, you could definitely do it. It's not going to hurt the stream. It's not going to, other than people will leave because they'll think it's broken, and the longer it takes, that 30 seconds is in internet time is an eternity. But if it's important, people will stay. But you can usually expect to lose 25 or 30% of your viewers really fast. They'll just be like, "Oh, it broke." They're not usually upset. Live streams break all the time, but they go somewhere else. So anyway, yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, that's part of why I asked this question is, you know, it's a question that I asked because I don't know what I don't know. So just to have this discussion, I think is really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
So appreciate it.
We don't do any, really don't do any streams without a primary and a backup, you know, ingest. You know, like we have some way that we're passing those. Now, typically what we're using are 2 links that are going into AWS. I mean, this is one of the many ways we do it. It could be 2 elementals, 2 links, 2 other, you know, but we always have 2 encoders with 2, and generally what we try to do is have 2 diverse internet connections. And we try to double up as many things as we can. That obviously is not practical, and you know, for everything. And if I'm doing, obviously I don't have that here. If I lose connection here, we'll just go down. So it just depends on budget and availability. Next question.
Mark Hadley out of Seattle, Washington. Does the panel use the same tool for storing software passwords, cloud passwords, and most importantly, key pairs?
Yeah, go ahead, George.
I use 1Password, and for me, yes, I'm storing my all my instances in 1Password. It does have a section for servers, so I treat my instances as servers and just store my passwords in there. Your key pair, you can store it in your 1Password, but you might want to have a copy of it on the outside for quick access.
Yeah, no, Taylor.
Similarly to George, I use a similar tool called LastPass, and that's where I house those passwords, certificates, key pairs, etc.
I'm a LastPass person. I've been doing that for about a decade. I don't know if it's that big of a difference between 1Pass and LastPass as far as quality when you're an individual. I feel like the LastPass was what was really the reason I got into it is my company was doing it, and we could basically send access to someone in the company in LastPass without giving them the password. We could say, you know, it'll autofill the password for them, but they don't get to see the password. When you get used to, what I will say is I wouldn't live without a password manager. My passwords now are huge hashes because I don't have, it doesn't matter. I'm not gonna, well, if it's 8 random letters or 26 random letters, I might as well make it 26, you know, because it's going to fill it in. It's not like I'm going to remember that. So I have, you know, everything is these long hashes. You know, for everything, and they're all individual for every website, and you jump onto a computer and you know, install the extension, log in, do the thing, log out. I have my LastPass set so that it will log me out of, I'm only allowed to be logged into one device at a time. So it will log me out of any other device when I log into a new device. And that keeps, because I use it so often, it just keeps it floating around with me. Rupert?
As well as all the online password managers like LastPass, there is quite a good offline tool if you need that, and it's called KeyPass. It's just a local file, but the encryption's pretty good on that if you want to keep everything offline.
And I think that the current belief system around around how to secure LastPass is a phrase typically from your childhood, one that no one would know. Like just something that some random thing from your childhood that you've never used, you know, with anyone around that you will remember is generally found to be more secure and easier to remember. You don't have to write it down than most other solutions. So you have kind of a long phrase. It gets to be a pain when your facial recognition doesn't work on your phone, because I had a very, very long phrase for my phone, and I had to shorten it until we could take our masks off. Go ahead, Courtney.
I've never used LastPass, but I wanted to know, for those of you that do, how does it compare to the Google's password management built into Chrome or Samsung's built into the Samsung devices?
Go ahead, Taylor.
Password management.
Much more secure. For example, in the Google Chrome, if I would gain access to your computer, I can literally go into your Chrome browser and see those passwords in plain text with little to no
you do have to know the
pushback.
password to the computer to access that, though.
Correct. And with LastPass too, the primary reason it's more secure. There's more security around it.
It also works on a lot of other devices. I mean, I don't know how Google Chrome would work it. The Google password control would work on my phone, but my LastPass does.
No, it carries across all devices that run Chrome.
But I'm saying I don't. I can use LastPass with every application on my phone. You know, that's the distinction. So that's, you know, and I definitely don't want it in 2 places. Yeah, go ahead, Taylor.
Steve Gibson, the Security Now podcast, he has a few episodes that cover a lot of this in detail. I would encourage you to check that out for more information.
Next question.
Jesse Mills here on the panel from San Francisco says, are there any recommendations for a mid-level pan tilt zoom camera with great auto tracking?
I don't even know of high level ones that do great auto tracking. I mean, there's, like we're looking a little bit, and we're going to probably bring them on here to talk, are the guys from Blacktracks. That's probably one of the better solutions in that area. But that's an actual sensor. Go ahead, Jeff.
Closest thing to mid-level would be around a $5,000 UE70, the little brother to the 150s that we use, and it's a decent camera, but their auto tracking is still a lot to be considered. The tracking system we use is our Mark Roberts solution, which is with our Mark Roberts heads, but they are also, I guess you'd call them ambidextrous, that they'll work with other stuff too. So they're ambiguous to what platform now. They'll work with UE 150s, UE 70s, the 100s, mostly Panasonic because they have a good partnership with them, but they're also bridging out into Sony's. And there's also another company called Sear Vision, which has a great AI system too. The problem with them is it's a long-term, it's not a CapEx, it's an OpEx. So you have to do it by the month, by the year kind of subscription thing. That's just, I have a problem with some of that. But it's a very good system, and they really can work with just about any motion camera out there. So worth looking into. Sear Vision, SEER vision.com, I believe is their domain. And they're really good guys. We had them come out and do a demo with us. It just didn't work for our application in sports, but it works really well in standing and walking and talking type stuff. But it's not cheap. Nothing to do real tracking is cheap.
Yeah. Well, and the one that I'm really curious about is the one that the mixture that I want to test, and as soon as I get a hold of the hardware, is the new Canon PTZ that's about $5,000 with a 1-inch sensor. It looks really good, mixed with Blacktracks. And so that's the thing that I'm going to hopefully test in the next month or two. Those two, and I just don't know whether they'll work together yet or not. But that's kind of magical for me.
And keep in mind too, there's a lot of different ways of tracking, optical tracking. Panasonic has a solution where optical tracking, they use a little baby camera underneath it. It sort of works. Both Sear Vision and Mark Roberts use the actual signal from the camera. So it knows what it's seeing, and it does by bone tracking. So it knows the distance from here to here, here to here. And even if you turn like that, it knows that this is the same person. So people could walk behind you, and it doesn't, the Panasonic would be like, oh, ball. Well, bald head.
And Blacktracks works with a sensor. So you literally give the speaker a sensor and it just tracks it.
Right. For us, that doesn't work at all.
For you, it doesn't work. But for speakers on a stage, I think you'll find that the sensors will be way more useful than AI when you have a limited number of people that are going to go on stage. It's just going to be more accurate by a long shot and not get distracted and not have, the AI stuff is coming up and it will take over at some point, but it's not gonna beat putting something in someone's pocket. All right, next question.
I'd love to put those side by side because I've had a lot of experience testing them, and I would disagree. I think the AI is from these two systems but you pay for it. Blacktracks is not inexpensive either, though, is it?
Right. I don't know exactly what the price is because we're just in testing, but we'll
it's up there.
Yeah. So we'll see what it looks like. Next question.
Show friend Laura Seal, who is often on the panel and often in the chats before and afterwards in Greensboro, North Carolina, says Felipe is part of a post team on a new docuseries. The director tweeted that it broke, quote, new technical ground using Final Cut Pro 10 and is a good model for breaking away from Avid and Premiere. Can Felipe talk about the technical challenges of the project?
Well, technical challenges were everyone was remote. All the 8 editors, all the 7 assistant editors, producers, the director, delivery to Technicolor. And well, there will be articles about it, and there will be probably a session during post-production world coming up soon about that. So I'm sorry, that's all I can say about it for now.
Are you able to tell us what the actual project was? Were you able to tell us what the project was?
Yeah, it was Q Into the Storm is the 6 episode documentary for HBO.
Very cool. Very cool. Excellent. Maybe after you've done the PPW and everything else, we'll drag you back on. All right. Next.
Sure,
next
my
question.
pleasure.
Excellent. Next question.
Tommy Chance of St. Paul, Minnesota. What's the best way to stream to multiple platforms? I found out yesterday we were putting the YouTube link in Facebook, and that's a no-no.
Yeah. Won't know what to do with that. There's a lot of different ways to do it. I'm just looking. You can obviously, some encoders are powerful enough to just encode. You can, like, if you have a powerful enough computer with Wirecast or Memo Live or vMix, you can export. You can just put out another endpoint. A lot of times that'll put a lot of pressure on your network, your local network. So you have services like Restream, as well as what we use is AWS for it. So we build the stuff in AWS and then stream into AWS either through RTMP or with a link, and then go from there, because we want to have scalability. Like, we want to be able to do more complicated things. Go ahead, Peter.
I was going to say, I mean, I've done both of the first two things you've mentioned, which is like my ATEM Mini Pro, now my Mini Pro Extreme ISO, will stream to Restream.
Right.
.io, and that works fine. But also I have played with and used successfully the fact that my Mac Pro has enough oomph that I could tell Memo Live to fire up two streamers and off it goes, right? And you're right, it does put it's measurable stress on my network, but I have symmetrical gigabit into the house, so it's not too bad.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, George, and then Jeffrey.
My heart rate always goes up when we have these conversations. My biggest consideration is my client, because when you try to push 3-4 streams from the same box and it goes down, your client is just not going to forgive you. Yep. So that's the only thing I'll say about that.
Yep. Jeffrey?
The only thing that I would say is if you're actually hard coding the YouTube link in there and you push it to Facebook and YouTube, it's still going to have that hard code link in. So in that case, you would probably have to separate the sources to two different computers, one that would get a Facebook link and one that would get a YouTube link.
Well, if you're connecting, if you're using the APIs to connect, but if you're using, I don't use APIs that often. Like I don't like them doing stuff for me. So I most of my stuff is done with a RTMP or HLS, ingest is generally how I kind of approach that, mostly because I want control. And so yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Comes back from Tony Mobley again from Newman, Georgia. Can you share what the Unreal Engine complete installation setup looks like on a Mac? I have a feeling my installation is not complete.
I don't know. Nick's not here, and I haven't installed it on my Mac, so I don't know if anyone else has. I mean, it should be Unreal opened, and then you should be able to install the pieces there. So I don't know what else you would need to have there, but yeah, mine's on a PC as well. I plan to do this on a PC. Next question. Sorry, I don't know what it should look like, but this is something, by the way, Tony, we're not covering that much ground on the first week. This is the kind of thing that we can work through in the lab, time during tomorrow. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. Next question.
Ari Block of Tel Aviv, Israel is back with the ATEM software has some settings for EQ and other audio conditioning of inputs. Will these basic settings do a good enough job for speech, or is another EQ software recommended? And if so, what would that be? The platform is Windows.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yes, the ATEM software EQ and things is perfectly fine. It's perfectly serviceable. Most DSP software, we figured this out, and they all work fairly much the same. The only thing I would love in the ATEM software is that the high-pass filter had a steeper slope. It's a 12 dB per octave high-pass filter. I'd love to see 18 or 24, but that's about it.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I could definitely get the job done, specifically just with speech on the ATEM control. But when you're dealing with any sort of processing, especially dynamics, compression, and gating, you want to be very light-handed with it, especially for speech. You don't want to overprocess things.
Next question.
Some guy in Nevada, California named Alex L probably wrote this question down yesterday and has been carrying it around since then. It says, what is Blackmagic Mini Recorder? Does it work with Big Sur?
I got someone tweeted at me like, hey, does my mini recorder is not working with Big Sur? And I wrote it down. See, I did exactly what I told you guys to do. I was like, I looked at it and I said, I don't know. I haven't tried to connect it to, I only have one Big Sur machine because I have so many things that aren't compatible with it. Or actually I have a couple, but they're not something I use every day. And so I just don't know. Peter?
Absolutely does. Just make sure you're update to the latest
firmware.
I mean, just
the firmware.
You know, when they push the firmware, think about it a little bit, but in some cases, just let it go. I mean, mine is hooked up right now. I do have the bidirectional Blackmagic card, so I can take output from an HDMI,
right,
and turn it SDI in.
I haven't updated firmware on a Mini for so long. I forgot that it even did it. So yeah, so the firmware is I think what I was missing when I was like, I don't know what that is. Anyway, next question.
David Brady of New York says, if you had an ATEM Mini and an Extreme, would you put all the cameras in one versus the other, all the cameras in the middle and Mini and program out of the Mini into the Extreme, or the other way?
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I have both, and I'll definitely put the cameras in the Extreme because you can adjust far more. You can adjust the gain, the focus, the iris, the shutter. I mean, it's yeah.
Well, and also, yeah. Go ahead, George.
If you're not using Blackmagic cameras, I would just use the basic Mini. That's what I do. If it's not Blackmagic cameras or sources, I'll use the basic Mini and then use the Extreme.
Well, he's got both of them. He's got both of them could theoretically do it. I think that the reason that you'd want cameras in your Extreme is because you'd want to use them as single sources for a super source. So, you know, I want to put my cameras in there. If I was going to do something else, I'd probably, if I needed more inputs, I would probably put those into extras into the ATEM Mini, which I am admittedly considering. But I would probably, but the having the camera sources as part of a super source, I think would be valuable. Yeah, go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, I'd also want to avoid any extra delay if I could in the system, so I'd go into the Extreme.
Yep. Go ahead, Jonas.
So we actually do it that way. We put every camera into the Mini Extreme and then take the program out and add like logos, lower thirds on the Mini, and also countdown, because we found it's really cool if you have a countdown and you can still test on your Extreme, because the countdown is coming in before it goes out to the stream. And that feature alone is really, really handy.
We often have two switchers in our chain specifically to do that, is to do a countdown clock. And what we do is we have audio follows video. So we go to the countdown clock, it turns off all the audio. When we go back to program, it just automatically passes it through. The other thing we oftentimes do if you're using an ATEM Mini or any switcher as a safety is we do have a safety video. That might be a wide shot of the room. That might be something else. That's if the whole system goes down, that's the last thing into the encoder, and you can make that work. Now, when we have more, SDI rigs, then we have a switcher that's doing that safety that Jonas is talking about. We also route into our encoder a second feed from the original switcher. So if that switcher goes down, we have a way around it. So we always worry about we're always trying to avoid single points of failure or SPOFs. All right, next question.
Roman Kuryak of Kiev, Ukraine says, can I use the modern WACOM tablet with an LCD screen as an OSC controller for vMix or WIRECAST, kind of like a Stream Deck, kind of expensive Stream Deck, but
I don't know of any app that does that specifically. I mean, all it's doing with that input is taking the input that you have and converting it to it just takes a mouse position from where you're tapping it. So there's another app that goes along with this app that will breaks up the screen into another screen into quadrants. And so I can just tap on those to cut. And so you can do that, but that for me, it's a custom application that does that. And I don't know of anything else that does that well. Next question.
Todd Adams of North Adams, Massachusetts says, I have a client who's a conductor. So for a virtual rehearsal, they don't want to be locked to the desk and a close mic. Considering a shotgun or a wireless go-to as opposite options, thoughts from the panel or alternatives? And thanks.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I would also think about a dual ear headset that will stay on moving around and give consistent speech for him to give things back to the musicians.
Go ahead, Mickey, and then Bill.
Yeah, definitely between the two, a shotgun or a wireless microphone system, I would go with wireless, because a shotgun, unless you have someone who's swinging the pole, you're going to go off axis eventually.
Did you see the True Audio April Fool's video?
That's brilliant.
So funny. Yeah, it's so funny. All right, Bill.
Yeah, I was just going to say this is the perfect example for a headset mic and a wireless body pack, so that you can move around freely and get the same sound everywhere you go, no matter which way you turn your head or anything else.
Yep. Next question.
Moving on to Frederick Jepson in Munich, Germany. And Frederick says, any concerns using a mono telex in-ear monitor in a stereo headphone output? The plug ground ring will short the non-tip output in the stereo jack to ground when the plug is inserted.
Mickey?
With a modern stereo wireless IEM system, you shouldn't have any worries in terms of possibly damaging a piece of equipment, but just know that anything panned to the right channel won't be heard if you're transmitting in stereo. I would recommend just switch your in-ears to a mono cable, just to make sure that it works properly.
Yeah, and there's I don't know what it is for telex. For audio implements, they have separate cables for the in-ear monitors. And so what we do is we ship all of our in-ear monitors with both the stereo and the mono cable, just to make sure that you can just swap them out depending on what's there. Go ahead, Jeff.
Mickey got most of it, but this is one of the problems with TRS, is it actually, as you insert it and remove it, it connects wrong. First tip connects to sleeve, then tip connects to ring, then finally tip connects to tip. Where that really becomes a problem is in 1/4-inch microphone patch bays with phantom power getting misconnected. Headphones, it's not a problem usually.
Next question.
Thomas Brauer in Germany says, is there a recommendation for an easy-to-use stereo delay with XLR inputs and outputs and no Behringers, please?
Yeah, go ahead, Jesse.
Just found this one called the Kramer VA256XL. It looks pretty promising. It's got Phoenix connectors in it, so you have to make your own little XLR to Phoenix deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've used the last time we really did that inside of a separate delay box was using a data video, has a stereo in and out that'll do it. It's a little noisy, like it was years ago, maybe a decade ago. A little noisy going in and out. I don't know of other ones that are pure analog. Most of the time we do these now in our mixers. Jeff?
Yeah, TC Electronics used to make one. I think it was the TC1280, but it's been long discontinued. But the nice thing about it is it would do sub-sample delay.
Yeah, the rise of, in some ways it'd probably be cheaper to use something like an XR12 and just drop it in as a digital mixer. The rise of it'll do it. You have to apply it as an FX filter, which is annoying, but it's not just an input delay, which I still can't understand why they do that. But the rise of digital mixers have kind of destroyed that market, because almost every digital mixer has a delay built into it, and so in some way, shape, or form. And so it's just made that market, because almost, vast majorities of folks are moving to digital, as they should, because analog is a real pain in the neck in this area. That separate delay box has become less important. Next question.
Comes from Gabriel Ung in Malaysia, and he said he's had the unfortunate luck with all of his ATEM Production 4K SDI inputs slowly dying. Audio goes in, but no video. Tried everything, but can't revive them. Should I wait for the Blackmagic to update their Pro ATEM range or get the unit fixed? And he said the Production 4K has been a love-hate relationship for him. He also notes that he needs a rack-mountable system and SDI. Those are his main considerations, and that's why the ATEM Extreme would only be considered as a last resort.
So Gabriel, I'm going to guess, wild guess, that you are on each show plugging directly into the back of those switchers. So you're actually, you know, every time you set up, you're plugging into the switcher. You're plugging the cameras directly into the switcher. The ATEMs do not handle that well. Just period. It's not, you know, so it could be bad voltage, but it is almost always kinetic stress on the actual inputs. So that's where we've seen this happen over and over and over again in the routers, in the switchers. So what we use is convenience panels. We don't do anything on, like, once we install a switcher, we run all of its IO out into a back panel. And in that back panel, everything else goes from there. Number one is those connectors tend to be more, they tend to be hardier than what's in the actual switcher. They also, if they break, you just replace them. So we do that for almost everything. Now, what we have in our office is we actually go out to a patch bay, so we can just repatch everything all over the place. But for our mobile kits that don't use patch bays, we have convenience throughs that work really well. Go ahead, Peter.
I was going to say, I'm actually in the process of building what you discussed, because and it's actually just for HDMI, because the connections are always, you don't want to put a lot of stress on those connections, period. So all my ins and outs will run through here, and then I'll have really short cables running to the Mini Extreme.
And you can see that's one of the things I just ordered for one of my Blackmagic cameras, is that, you know, they can have HDMI, that little loop that Small Rig makes.
Yeah.
That you can connect it so that anything that, just remember that the connection to the device, super expensive. because for some, the equipment is anywhere from unreplaceable to really expensive to fix. So you protect that connection, and almost all the time we try to find something that will relieve the stress, protect the stress, not put any angular stress on those inputs. And again, I can't imagine all of your inputs and outputs going bad unless you're connecting directly to them every show. They will not survive that.
By the way,
That's.
I can say the same thing about the power supply connector on the 6K Pro camera. That is the most, for somebody who used to do power engineering, that is a scary connector.
Yeah, it is. A lot of, especially connectors that come out straight, you know, that have a long straight area. The longer the rigid area is coming away from your switcher, the more leverage it has. Go ahead, Beju.
Yeah, one point I'll just say, if you're using it in the field and if the power is bad, I have seen current coming back on the SDI cables and damaging the SDI ports on the mixers as well. We had it happen to a couple of our ATEM Minis. So that's one thing you need to be really careful about, especially if you're plugging into any random power on your camera side.
Yeah, these can be ground issues. We've had that kill AJA FS2s, which is a really expensive and sad thing to have happen. And so we've had to be very careful. This has been mostly in Africa. So square wave power and ground issues have definitely destroyed SDI inputs as well. So that's a great point, Beju. Next question.
James Babbitt in San Diego says, hey, Alex, when you use the Shure MV51 USB mic, do you use the headphone jack on the MV51 or do you use the headphone jack on the Mac?
I use the headphone jack on the Mac. I don't like it going through my, you can, and you get zero latency because it's just passing your audio right back to you. But I like to listen to it because if anything goes wrong, I want to be able to, I don't want to have to start moving cables around. Go ahead, Mickey. Not that it's ever happened to me.
Yeah, if you want to have a side tone wherein you're listening to your own mic in your ears, then you would want to listen through the microphone itself. But aside from that, there's no real no real technical difference between the two.
Yeah, and if I was doing a voiceover, I'd probably put it right into the mic. I do it on live shows. I do it on the output because I had a Centrix or Centra. Before I got the X2U, I had one, and it went bad, and my headset's plugged into it, and my computer was out of my reach, and there was a whole big mess, and I'm on Mac break sitting there trying to unplug it and plug things in. And from that moment, maybe a decade ago, I always plug my headphones into my computer. I don't hear myself at all. Courtney?
I'm not sure how it works on the Shure. I had an Audio Technica that is also a USB interface, and it has an headphone jack on it. And you also hear the return from the computer on that headphone jack in addition to the microphone.
Right.
And so it would mix them together. I don't know if the Shure does the same thing or if you can control the balance of the local fold back from the microphone.
You can. With the Shure you can control it.
USB. Okay.
Yeah, you control side tone. Now we're going to go into speed mode because I know we have to start on time. Next question.
We may have to skip it. Brian Carpenter says, is panelist Paul Wallace showing off in his background the same PC display as Nick Jushchyshyn uses on his Unreal desk? But Paul is no longer here, I don't
All
think
right.
so.
Next question.
So moving on, we're going to Gabriel Ung in Malaysia. Clients wanting to dip their feet into live streaming are apprehensive over the high risk that entails and prefer the pre-record and playback route. What are your thoughts on the value of live streaming if attendee interaction doesn't seem to be a priority, and how could we change their minds?
Well, usually what we talk about with clients is that there are 3 reasons to stream. One is sports, another is live breaking news, and the third one is interactivity. If you don't have one of those 3, the value drops pretty dramatically. So that's the thing to think about. There's not really any reason for someone to watch it. Generally, we find that viewership drops pretty dramatically on a live stream if people realize that there's no interactivity. Now, you can add interactivity by answering people's questions in the comments. So we've seen some success in that area where you're watching it and you're able to, if the key stakeholders are in the comments answering questions while people are watching, there is some level of interactivity. But if you look at the show that we're doing here, this is all interactivity. I mean, that's all we're doing. And our view time is dramatically higher than the average, 10 times higher than the average YouTube stream because it's interactive. Jeffrey, 10 seconds.
I'll add to that anything that adds ability for sleeping or anything like that, like birds flying or cats or just kind of fun like that, then that could be good. But yeah, it doesn't have much interactivity.
People. All right, next question.
Robert Baker of Rockville, Maryland says, has anyone used the Atomos Sync X for timecode or any part of their ecosystem since they've incorporated timecode systems into Atomos?
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of timecode systems products. Even way back when they were still called the timecode buddy. The rock solid performance. Just know that if you are feeding a timecode into an external recorder, the timecode that is embedded there is earlier than the actual feed of video that is being recorded, because you're not taking into account the SDI latency that's coming through there. So you need to dial in an offset and post.
Next question.
Roman Kirk is back from Kiev, Ukraine, with what best gamification trick can you advise for keeping webinar audiences active and engaged? And thank you so much for your sharing.
Get rid of slides. That's number 1. And then engage with Q&A. That's number 2. Those are the 2 most effective things that you can do to increase engagement with the audience. You can definitely, there's lots of gamification. There's lots of little techniques and tricks that you can try to do, but interacting with your audience powerfully and not using slide decks. And if you're going to use slide decks, they have to be really, really well designed and have to keep moving fast. They can't. They underline what the person's trying to talk about. The color management that Netflix / the Foundry just did, I think I posted it yesterday. That is a great example of using Keynote. I'm pretty sure it's Keynote. They might have animated it, but you could have done it in Keynote if they didn't. And the first time I've seen in a long time someone use Keynote really well without ever seeing a speaker or interactivity. You can actually watch it, and it's a great breakdown of color management. But it is really, really highly well built Keynote file. I mean, if they didn't do it in there, then they should have, because it would have been a lot easier. So a really well moving deck is a good thing, but really the best way to do it is get rid of the decks and get into conversation. Send them videos ahead of time if they want to watch the videos. But the demos it's just presentation poison. Peter?
I was going to agree with you. One of the things we've worked very hard on and found useful is they're not decks, but they're Keynote animations, I guess is the best way, keyed over, so that, because we were just shooting some stuff where a young lady was showing how to turn around from sailing into the wind to tacking against the wind.
Mm-hmm.
And so a God's eye view done in animation helped describe what she was attempting to do. And then we cut to a live shot where she was actually doing it, right? And that was useful for, we're training some kids how to do this. Oh, but they got the point, right?
Yep.
But it took a while to get that God's eye view working.
Yeah. We might, we'll probably do a tips and tricks at some point with that. But interacting with folks, letting them watch the videos and gather the information ahead of time, and then having a conversation. Even if only 10% of the audience watches the video, you'll have a big conversation that's much more interesting to watch than it is than watching someone talk for a long time. It's a great way. People don't necessarily leave, but it doesn't mean they didn't check out. You're up in some corner. We're going to probably do another round of eye tracking soon, but the eye tracking we did a little over 10 years ago, what we found is that as soon as you put up a slide, almost immediately, within 60 to 90 seconds max is where we kind of maxed out at. But literally most people within 30 seconds of putting up a slide will put you in the corner. They'll just drag your slide to the corner and do something else while you're talking. You're now part of the passive, and then that doesn't have an engaging experience in the same way. Last question before we go to the
Chan Landy is in with, if the administrator of Mukana, as the administrator of Mukana, can you tell who rates the question, or is that anonymous?
I think we actually have that data. I don't look at it very often, but I think we can gather that data if we wanted to, but it's not anonymous if we wanted to look at it. We've looked at it a couple times when we felt like there was group behavior. So I can tell you that if we suspect group behavior, especially if we see negative numbers constantly on one person, usually that means that I start asking Chris for more data, and then people end up on the blacklist. Group behavior of negative votes is a great way to have me really not like you. So anyway, that's a very, very bad behavior. So like literally, if a group of people vote someone down, you might as well not be in the group. Like I don't need you here. So just something to know. I take it personally. All right. And I have negative numbers. I'm fine with that, by the way. Like half my questions have been in the negatives. I don't know exactly why, but everyone seems to gang up on me when I put up questions. All right. We're going to switch gears here and move to move into our AWS. We've got a bunch of questions we'll kick it off with, and then we'll jump in. I know the guys have it packed, but we want to make sure we get through the questions. We found that to be best practice. So let's go ahead and jump into the questions here. First question.
First question comes from Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas. Outages are rare, but they can happen. What are the contingency plans for outages related to the cloud?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Do you mean it's hard to say, Rupert, because sometimes you're talking about outages getting to the cloud, or are you talking about outages like in the cloud? In the cloud, redundancy. You've got 30 something odd data centers that you could talk to and set up information ports in. So I've got 5, 6 that I relatively use regularly. So that's my redundancy in the cloud. But I've never gone as far as like a major data center going down. Unlikely. Availability.
Yeah, I think I read that wrong. I think actually the first word is could here, but I think cloud outages.
Rupert's here. So
okay, great.
Yeah, so I mean, it's rare and kind of some edge cases, but a few weeks ago, authentication outage, which means it was difficult to get into anything. No matter how much you had in the cloud, it was difficult.
And Rupert, we're losing you. There couldn't have been a more well-timed cloud outage to lose you right in the middle of your question. So if you can hear us,
cloudage.
We can't. You're not moving, or we're not hearing you. A cloudage.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Am I back now?
Yeah. Your audio is back. Your video is not. Go ahead and try to ask the question again.
Fair outage.
There we go.
Okay.
Go ahead and keep.
Okay.
Can you explain what happened? No, we lost you again. Sorry about that. We'll move on. George, Jonas, and Peter, real quick. We're going to move through this one.
A lot of times, if it's going to be a major outage in AWS, you'll start getting ping from the rest of your services. So I think you pretty much get a heads up if it's going to be a big outage.
And I guess the question is, what do you do about it? Is the problem there? Jonas and then Peter.
First thing is spread your loads about multiple regions and availability zones, ideally across multiple cloud providers, but that's not really practical. And second, I have linked an article from Netflix, how they handle it if a whole region goes down, because they evacuate a whole region in, I think, 15 minutes, which is amazing.
Go ahead, Peter.
I was going to say, I think where he was coming from was a week ago, Azure lost all authentication capabilities across the globe. You're the
And do we think that was
way
part
of
of
saying that was SOL.
Yeah, and I believe that was a DNS issue.
That's right. So the key there is unfortunately, because if you're in already, you're in. If you're not in already, you're SOL at that point.
From a streaming perspective, we have used multiple CDNs to, we'll stream to 2 different CDNs like Azure and AWS.
Yeah.
And feed
but
those
if
back.
you can't authenticate into that system, so if the end user can't authenticate, say corporate teams is a good example, right? Where I do streaming to corporate teams,
but our calculation is that we might lose authentication on one set. We might probably, if we lose it on both of them, the problem is so big that we probably don't have to worry about anyone complaining.
And that's fair enough.
Yep. Next question.
Jim Hinkins of Chesterfield, Michigan is up next with, have you started to use Mac OS based EC2 in your productions?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yes. Be prepared to open your wallet wide, really, really wide. You literally can pay for a Mac Mini, which they're basically using, Mac Minis. You can pay for one about every, I think I've calculated out about every 28 days or something like that. So it's expensive. And I would not suggest it. They even say, well, we're just playing that for just short-term testing. Well, better be very short.
Next question.
Jim's back right again with, are you taking advantage of AWS auto scale for your instances?
We're doing it ourselves. We're managing that part ourselves. We're not at the point that you need true auto scale.
Next question.
Daniel Goldstein of Washington, D.C. recording a Zoom meeting with OBS. When I close or even minimize the remote desktop client on my desktop, OBS starts recording black until I open it again. I can make the remote desktop client smaller without issue. The Zoom meeting is on one virtual monitor, OBS on another.
Go ahead, Jeff.
First suggestion I would say is don't use OBS. It's just not that strong in the cloud, honestly.
Yeah, go ahead,
and it has to do with how it handles the graphics and how it works together with the graphics.
Yeah, since when you close your RDP session, the interface isn't rendered anymore. We fixed that by using Nice, because Nice keeps the session open even if you disconnect. So that's the fix.
Next question.
Greg Gibson, Washington, D.C. Along the lines of the contingency plan question, what are the options for controlling cloud instances if your local internet or power goes out and passing control to an operator in another location isn't an option?
Go ahead, Shurag.
During Snowmageddon in Dallas, or in Texas, not too long ago, we actually had that issue. So power was going out. So what I actually did was use a Fire tablet connected to my cloud instance, and I was able to, just hotspot my phone to that, and I was able to, switch my show from there.
Go ahead, Rupert.
In that very scenario here in Dallas, I had to drive about a quarter of a mile even to get cell service that was enough even to carry a Skype call.
So you're sitting in a car in a snowstorm, controlling your AWS potentially. Yeah, it's scary. Next question.
Georgie Kennedy.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Guy, before we jump in.
Yeah, I have this iPad connected with cellular, so it's got an AT&T SIM card built in, and then the Teradici app and the remote desktop app from Microsoft both run just really well on the latest and greatest one. The chip in here is, I believe it's the predecessor to the M1, right? So it's super quick. It feels fast. So it's the Hail Mary, I call it. So I was telling Greg he needs to get one of these because he had a show where he actually had things freeze up. So on his local computer, because of energy saver. So you got to be careful.
Energy saver. All right, next question.
Georgie Kennedy of Washington, D.C. Jeff, what's your proper combo for having your teams connect to the same AWS instance without losing connection? And he's wondering, Teradici, RDP, TeamView, Parsec, what?
Teradici first for the primary control. Then after that, TeamViewer. That's my choice. But not all of my clients that I help set up also, they tend sometimes to be a little more price conscious and have different, I guess you say, pain points. My experience with Parsec is good, but not great compared to what it is with TeamViewer. We've got a lot of machines on it, so I'll route most of my extra control surfaces through TeamViewer. or control opportunities through TeamViewer, then the control surfaces themselves are going multiple ways, whether it's direct IP from a Scorhoy or from central control, which is one of the things we're going to show today.
Go ahead, George.
So Jeff, that was a setup question. That's an ongoing conversation in the cloud production side of Discord. I know Greg is in the external. So it's problematic sometimes because if you're using RDP, which you do not recommend, your Zoom would disconnect, and sometimes Zoom would actually kick you completely out of the app of itself, and you have to log back in. So as we move forward, you have to be careful of what apps you're actually using to connect to your instances with. And if you want Teams to be able to control, like for instance, I do the main switch, which you recommend Teradici, and then have everyone else connect maybe to Parsec, like an audio person to the same instance, maybe using Parsec, so they could control a little bit of the audio.
Yes, that's exactly why I say that. RDP should only be used to very initially set up the machine. And that, so you're setting the password, setting the name of the machine like we demoed. And then after that, use Teradici or TeamViewer or Parsec. And the main thing is on the G series, the graphics card is not engaged. If you're using, from what I understand, I know that's a problem with us in VizRT's VizVector. I can't run VizVector if I'm RDP'd in. It just will not work because the graphics card is not engaged. It's not using the GPU. So that's another reason don't use RDP, except just change your password, your instance password, like we demoed, and change the name of the computer so it's something easy to find in your network. And then after that, Teradici or something else.
Yeah, Rupert.
And my last experience of installing TeamViewer on AWS, particularly if you're installing it through RDP, is that the initial TeamViewer ID that it gives you relates to that RDP session, and that the machine behind the scenes, the native machine, had a different TeamViewer ID, which I had to go into the registry and find, because if that RDP session wasn't open, that TeamViewer ID didn't apply at that moment.
That is correct. Basically, it's a multi-user. So that's the way TeamViewer works, is it basically shows up as multiple users underneath Windows. So if you go in and you can set it up, basically we have to reauthorize everything twice in TeamViewer. It sends you that email saying, hey, are you sure this is yours? That kind of thing. So when you go to authorize the device, usually it's twice, but the main thing is if you do the password change, then you do the name of the machine change. Like I said, usually you could get into TeamViewer at that point, and then after you have TeamViewer, and then you register that machine to be in your TeamViewer list, and it works fine.
Next question.
Mark Harder of Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn says this is probably a vMix question, but on a vMix call, how do you change what the caller sees to something other than program, like a Q&A or another panelist for a conversation, for example?
Go ahead, George, and then Chirag.
So you have 4 outputs. So you could build a multi-view, for instance, of what you actually want your callers to see, and just use one of the outputs to be able to assign it. And you can actually set it up on your Stream Deck so you could toggle between the program and your custom multi-view.
Good, Chirag.
Yep, and Jonas is actually showing my cloud instance right now, and it's got the vMix call window open. So when you create a vMix video call, there is the option for return feed to guest, and you can choose output 1, 2, 3, 4. And then, as George said, whatever is showing on one of those outputs, your guest will be able to see.
That's great. Next question.
And second to last one. Eddie Martinez of Sacramento says, when does the annual Teradici license make sense to purchase?
Go ahead, Jeff.
If you plan on using your machine more than 21 days in a year, that's when it basically flips over at that point. It is 50 cents per hour. Now, I'll say 21 days times 24 hours, but that's basically where it is. And so you can do the math. It's 50 cents per hour. You can figure out if you're really into it. If you're only doing a show that's 3 hours a day and you're doing one a week, then you might be able just to do the pay by the go, but it's really not a lot.
Next question.
And the final one, Daniel Goldstein of Washington, D.C. What are the best practices for using a single vMix license on EC2 instances that keep being created and terminated, and also on our physical computers?
You're going to get flagged. Your machine will get flagged. Your account will get flagged if you continually create and don't. Just leave the machine parked. Just turn it. Like if you create an EC2 instance, just stop it, not terminate it. Just stop it, and then you're paying cents per day to basically store that image, so that 30 gigs or whatever you set up the system drive with, and then from that point on, you're just paying that per day, and it's relatively small. If you are sweating those small amounts, I would suggest don't be in the cloud, because it's just a part of doing business.
All right, we're gonna go ahead, Jim, real quick.
Yeah, I was just going to say that you could terminate and respawn an instance so long as you baked that AMI, so that when you start a new instance, everything's the same. So you don't have to reactivate the license. It's as it was.
And I have to say, Jim, I've noticed it all day. Your frame is amazing. Like that, like it just looks really good. So anyway, go ahead, Jonas.
Even with the same AMI, it probably will tell you to re-authenticate, because it will look at the CPU and see if that one changed. So if that one changed, it will be like, hey, you changed your setup, please put in your license key again.
All right, let's jump into it. I know that you guys probably have a couple things to talk about. As we get ready.
We might have a few things that we kind of rehearsed last night. I know there's a lot of Mac people on here, so I'm going to kick it off with showing my laptop, because this is just, it's a MacBook, but it's running a couple instances. So right now what you're seeing is just Safari with, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 instances. 4 of them are running. So I want you to think of this as, this is my cutting machine down at the bottom. And then and that's a G4 DN 4X. And then I got 3, what I'd call contribution instances. So I've named them Zoom 1, 2, and 3. And what we have running is, I know Jeff said not to use remote desktop, but for this demo, because I'm on one machine, usually I would spread this across a couple of machines. You can only run Teradici of one instance. So Teradici will be running the live stream cutting machine. And then remote desktop will be our contribution machine. So the first machine that we're going to look at is, hey, our old friend Zoom. We know and love, right? We know how to use this. So earlier, I made a new meeting and actually flagged off the fish tank so daylight would not pollute our fish tank, because this star of today is the fish tank. So this is a Zoom room downstairs, but it could be across the world. And one of the cool things about it is it'll auto answer. So if I invite it, it'll just come right into a meeting. And I can also do things like request camera control. So if this camera was at a sporting event, I could be, getting the shot that I want, or have any of my remote contributors framing this shot up the way that I want. If they have a PTZ, this is a PTZ camera in a Zoom room. It's just a $299 huddle cam in our case, so it doesn't have huge reach or anything. But now that you can see this instance, it's just again a Windows server running Zoom, so pretty straightforward there. What we're going to do is go ahead and just change the view. So we're going to make it full screen. I'll go ahead and take Microsoft Remote Desktop. And so in the preferences, you can clean up the stuff on the bottom, or you can crop it, but I just turned it off so it hides when I need it. And I'm going to go ahead and say full screen, which gives us that look. And I still get this little thing here. I'm going to move this down low. So that's down, well, a little lower. So minimize. Yeah, because otherwise you're going to see this talking thing when somebody talks. So I'm just going to push it down. And then in our other Zoom contribution machine, we're going to just open up a YouTube video. So this can be an SRT feed. It can be anything that you want to throw on a Windows server. This could be, just anything, RTMP, SRT, any of that. I'm going to go ahead and hit play on this. And when I hit play, one of the things that I already have hooked up is NDI screen capture. So to be able to send this out via NDI. So this is the way that we communicate between all the instances is NDI. So, so they're just machines in a rack in a server in Ohio, or let's see, am I in the way on that? Let me take me off the screen. So I'm going to press that. And so I'm going to open up NDI tools, and you can see that there's one here called screen capture, and it's running. It basically becomes a little little tool in your tray down there. And now this is sending out NDI to anything that's listening. And in my case, it's the Teradici instance. So now we're jumping over to that machine, which looks like this. So this is the cutting machine. So this is the bigger, more expensive machine. So to run this one, some people run it at a 4X and 8X, but this will be the one where you guys can go into the NDI tools. If you didn't set up a discovery server in Access Manager, you would have your remote sources and you would plug in like we did before with Jeff showed that demo. And so all these, we're listening to all these. If you have a discovery server, they would auto-populate, but I'm
Move it over a little bit,
it.
Guy. You're right underneath your pip.
Sorry. There you go. Yeah, these are the ones that are we're listening for. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Livestream Studio. This is what it looks like. Kind of looks like vMix, but it can be cheaper or I guess it's free with a plan now. Do you know what the cost is?
It's
Jeff?
free if you have the enterprise plan. Yes.
Free if you have the enterprise plan. Okay. Otherwise, the dongles are worth gold now, I hear, because I have one of those dongles, and Jeff was telling me, hey, you should.
Yeah, they stopped shipping with the dongles, so you have to have you basically have to have the enterprise plan in order to use it as a software base. But the dongles only work on-prem, so you can't use it in the cloud. But yeah, the software subscription's not too bad if you're using them as a CDN, especially.
So here's our fish tank, and it looks like I left a window open, so that's not clean. Let me jump back over to. And did I leave that open? Window, zoom 1, close that window. There we go. Now it's clean. Back over to Teradici. So there's our fish, and let's say, for instance, I'm like, man, that's a little flat. I don't like that color. I want to pump it up a little bit. So I'm going to go down to that instance, which is NDI 3. I'm going to go over here to my settings. I'm going to go down to, we have a couple options here. One would be crop. If you did still have some garbage on the bottom, you can go in here and crop it, and you can see the crop as I crop, it resizes. Down below though, here's a color, and I'm just going to do a quick pump up of the saturation, make it a little bit more vibrant. Whoa, that one suckerfish is cleaning the glass. All right, so now we've got that coming in. We've also got our bird. We can cut the bird over. We can take the fish over here. And I'm going to go ahead and stream this out. So this is down at the bottom. It says live stream. I'm going to go ahead and say go live. This is going to push this out of our AWS instance to a live stream event, which I had previously set up. And I will give you guys in Mukana the link so you guys can watch it in real time. Oh, maybe I don't have it. I do. Here we go. So you guys can see what that fish looks like in all its glory. But I got a little composite here that we've made, and we're going to modify this. So if you want to do a 3-up box, we're going to go here into our GFX. We're going to edit this GFX, and we're going to start to populate this one with the fish tank. So we're going to go in here to source. We're going to change that to NDI 3. There's our fish tank. We want this other one to be, say this one will be the bird.
And just to reiterate, these are all individual machines that are on his VPC. So these are all machines that are in his network that is in the cloud, and he's able to feed video from each one of those smoothly over NDI, video and audio.
Thanks. And one of the cool things about this this app is that you do have a web control setting. So right now I have Chris set up as full access. So Chris Fenwick is going to go ahead and add a title remotely. So Chris is at his place in California. I'm going to get out of this window. Cut to Chris.
So this is actually really cool because it's not only that I have control, I actually have kind of a subset of control to keep it under control. So I'm going to show you my screen, and you'll notice that you can see both Guy's screen and my screen, I believe. We can show that Mickey through Felipe, I believe. Oh no, we see them both. So on this, I can actually change my user interface a little bit, and I can make it more geared toward making graphics. So if I want to make a lower third, I can come down here and pull up one of these templates, pull this in, give it a name. I'll give it Alex Lindsay with an A, and title, we're going to go office hours. And now that that is highlighted, I have it right here, and I can actually push it into the stream, and I can actually, you know, take over a whole portion of control. I guess that didn't work so good. Maybe we shouldn't do that, Felipe and Mickey. My bad. But anyway, we have the ability, Mickey, if you want to show my feed now. I can create graphics. I can make new ones if I need to. And I can push those out live. I'm going to hit this little guy, and I can prep a second graphic, and I can put it into the stream. So you can separate responsibilities across the web and give different people different responsibilities. For example, you could even have one person just sit here and mix it all. I don't want to deal with that. So I just make my UI more graphic centric. So that's how I can help.
I have a quick question. I'm observing on Makana the experience, and then I've got the Zoom channel open, so I'm seeing different experiences. But I'm also a quick question to Jeff. When you said these are playing back on different instances in the cloud, where say the birds is a video, I assume that was uploaded to that cloud GCPU.
The bird is just playing a YouTube video right now. So that one, if we cut back to the bird instance, this is just a YouTube video. So all we did was we opened up a YouTube video and made it full screen. So we use that as a source. So this could be a live video. It would be a lot of delay if you went that route, you know, like 30 seconds or something like that. But if you did something faster, like SRT, you can get it under like 2 seconds.
Where would you, if you had playback video, where would you host that?
You could host it on one of those instances.
Yeah, either in one of the instances or here, or
better in the player itself.
That's what I was.
Jonas has some really cool stuff too.
The delay, the latency and delay is what I was curious about.
Well, for video playback, it would be instant. If you just loaded it in, you can just load it in here as a media source, and then you can have playback of whatever video you want. So it's simple to put videos inside a Livestream Studio or vMix. I mean, when I show Livestream Studio, a lot of this stuff can be done in vMix as well. Some of it in OBS. OBS might be a stretch, but Livestream Studio is pretty powerful. I know Alex didn't like it. It didn't have a good experience with the guest call-in, so don't use that part. But for the streaming and for basic cutting, I think it's pretty cool.
The guest call-in actually worked okay. Well, it has some issues, it has some limitations in the sense that you have to reset the key, or at least when we did it, we had to reset the key if we had to change it for somebody. So for both people, which was really problematic. The second thing was that I lost control a couple times from the far end. so like there was a local end, and then the far end, like what Chris was doing, lost connection a couple times from two fairly well connected locations. And for me, that was enough stress that I just was like, I'm done. But I could probably come back to it. I'd be open to it. Go ahead, Sky.
Well, and that's, Alex, you've got a lot of hardware that people are, I mean, you have a lot of stress. I get it. My question is, early days of Zoom was a horrible experience, but they actively, aggressively modified their security and all of the things that caused stress. And now it is a very stable and solid platform. I'm curious about the StreamYard, the live stream, all of these others. Are they still as bad as their first instance, or are they getting fixed?
When Hopin does their own event and can't
go.
get it right, it's concerning. You know, so I'm not saying, like, I think that when Jeff does it and when Guy's doing it and when Chirag's doing it, I think that's all great. You know, the main thing is that, you know, like I've gotten so much work because someone had one stream go bad. Like that's just like, you know, like that's to me, I'd rather have a simple stream, but man, like literally 3/4 of my work has been because someone came to me after a bad stream. So when you get with many clients, you get one bad stream. You know, and that's it. Like there isn't like a 3 strikes you're out unless you build up a relationship with someone. There is like that. Those kinds of things are kind of relationship enders. So if you're doing it in the cloud, and you definitely can do a stable version in the cloud, you just want to really thrash it, because unless you're an internal employee, well vested or whatever, if you're a freelancer doing a work for someone, you are the person that is you're the designated under the bus person. Like you're in there to protect the employees. Just remember that. So they'll just throw you under the bus, and that's your job.
Well, like you say about reps. I mean, Chirig, you've got what over 100 shows.
Right.
Jeff's got over 100 shows. I mean, coming up.
No, that's hiring.
That's it.
Hiring people with a lot of reps is the key. You know, doing an important show on your own, like if you're, for everyone, why we're trying to get everybody into this early is so that you can start playing with it. You can start doing stuff for nonprofits and doing stuff as favors and doing stuff at low budget and doing things where you have room to fail. That's what you want to do, is because this is going to take time. These guys, have been doing this a bunch. Tucker and Jeff and Chirag and Guy are all doing this all the time. And they've had their own little glitches while they were ramping up. And now they're, doing it stably. And you just want to keep that in the back of your head, that you'll get excited about these things, and but you want to be careful. That's all. With everything, hardware, cloud, because it can be the end, especially if you have a client you've been using for a long time. Just be super careful with them, because you can really ruin the relationship really fast. Anyway, go ahead. What's next?
So next is Jeff Keithley's going to show some remote control options. So he's got a bunch more than I thought that he would be busting out. So Jeff, you want to take it from?
Yeah, not a problem. All right, so I'm going to switch over and zoom here to my overhead camera that I have coming down. So these are a few of the controllers that I could put my hands on. This is an icon, which is basically a MIDI control interface. Motion slider. These sliders are actually a motorized slider, so you can move them up and down, or the software can move it also at the same time. Multiple buttons on here for mutes on and off. This is all linked up currently right now to my thank you, Chris. This is linked up to my VisVector Plus that's in the cloud, and so I'll show operations with that. Also over here is an X keys, and I have it set up. As you notice, the Stream Deck is changing at the same time, and I don't know if you can really see it, but right here on my Scarhoy controller, there also. So I have 3 different controllers all synced up controlling one VisVector instance in the cloud. This could be vMix. This could be it could be the live stream studio actually now has the ability to be controlled remotely. And we basically program these controllers, like for instance, this one here, we have it set up so I have live stream on one button, and so this gives me control of live stream on this layer, and then on this layer I'm selecting and I have VisVector or TriCaster depending on which device we're connecting to, whether it's in the cloud or not. So how do I do that? This is what we wanted to show, so give me just a second and let's go into our screen. If someone give me control to share. Any second. All right, and so we're using Central Control. Central Control is a fairly easy to learn platform. Joe DeMax is an actual friend of mine. Actually, now we spent a lot of hours with this together. So in each one of these, it works off devices. And so each one of these, as you see on the left side, I've got platform. That is the icon controller. Vector, that's my Vector Plus. Stream Deck, that of course is my large Stream Deck that I have out. The listener, and then that listener is actually a great program we use to control all our Zoom rooms, and that is using Vicrio. Vicrio listener, which is a free download to put on each one of the machines. It's all by IP address and ports, and so we can control multiple machines using that, and then vMix, and then this XK24 is the X keys button. So that's the last one I put in, so I'm gonna go in and just show you real quick how easy it is. So under device mapping, we should have this pop up, and then I go in, and if I hit jump to control, I just select which button I want. I selected the second row, which is normally my program row. And then I'm going to go into my vector, and then I'm going to set program row. And I want to say which input I want it to be. So I want it to be input 1, and that's it. And I add that command. and then I want to do the next button. Same thing. There's 2, which I want to do set program row, and I want that to be input 2. And that for the hardest part is just going in, and you can stack commands also if you wanted to within those buttons. And that is the hardest part of the programming. Probably the harder part is programming the platform, which is the icon. It is MIDI, so you have to kind of understand a little bit about MIDI, unless the software relatively very simply accepts that. So I'm going to bring up my VisVector Plus. So this is it running up in the cloud. And as you can see, as I'm moving my sliders up and down on the left side, you see the audio mixer moving up and down. You should be able to see both my camera and that, I believe. And so that gives that tactile feedback of it, mute on and off. And then on the switching side, what I just programmed in, there's my 1 and my 2, switching my inputs, and that could also be on my Stream Deck, or that could be here. And you notice they're all following along. I don't know if you can see that cleanly, but they're all following along of what's happening on all the controllers. So they're talking back and forth between them. Now, the next step is going to be where can we do to other platforms? So that's where I brought in the vMix that I have listed here, which is just the IP address. And then there is a certain port we have to open up in the security groups. And that's just things that you have to figure out as time goes on. With that IP address that we have here is the public IP address of the instance. And so this is the vMix that Chirac has up and running. And right now, Chirac, if you could let me know, and I'll just go to the Stream Deck here and go to device mapping. And I did this one a little bit different on the Stream Deck. Be easier to see if I can bring it up here. You notice I have a button for bank 1 and bank 2, and it actually already is, get that out of the way, already is saying here, gallery view, DVE, corner bug. And so now I'm sending out commands. And Chirac, is that working on your side?
There it is. Mickey just changed it. We were just seeing the interface, but now we see your Stream Deck.
And then that's the other, so this layer here is for the Vector Plus, and then the second bank I have just quickly programmed in, and that's what should be messing up Chirac's show right now.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it change on my end.
Okay, well, it's hitting it. It's just probably not on the right input or such. And so once you have things, and it takes a little time to program in the controls, but it doesn't, it really doesn't change much once you do the basics of it. With most of our applications, I would say that we probably program it in maybe small tweaks, 5-10 minutes. After the first programming, it might take in a couple hours. And then you'll want to revise it after using it the first time, and then you may want to program it again and make it a little bit more to suit your needs. But from the first part of using Central Control, which is not an expensive program at all, $50 perpetual, that's a one-time fee. It is amazing what you can get done with that piece of software and pretty much any piece of hardware that you have laying around. This is one other piece I wanted to show of the hardware side of things. And so let me flip back to this overhead. This controller here, I've had for almost 12, 13 years, something like that. And it's just a USB out. I could plug this in and program it inside to control either vMix or anything that the devices that are inside Central Control. I could have this programmed in probably less than 10 minutes. And that's amazing that this thing sitting on the shelf literally beat very well, beat up. And we blow the dust off of it, plug it in, and now I've got a control surface that I already had and I could reuse. That was one of the major things that prompted Joe to create Central Control, was to be able to use all those other devices that he had. So that's my little part. Chirac, you're up next.
Cool. So I'm going to give you but wait, there's more. So, Jeff showed some really, really awesome high-end gear. So the angle I'm coming from is I work for a nonprofit. Our use case is obviously, really fairly low budget. So in our workflow, what we do is we actually have 4 people that are all remote. We actually have not done a show in person in over a year. So, out of necessity, we had to push things to the cloud. We couldn't rely on local internet, and it's too many things to do. I couldn't manage everything. I did for a while, but Greg Gibson is amazing. His workstation, he does it all by himself. But we do what Greg does, very similar, but we split the load. So basically what we do is we have 4 guys that have Stream Deck. So if you can see that, nice little simple Stream Deck connected to Companion using a VPN. So basically all 4 people have identical setups on their little instances. And via a VPN, we can headlessly control everything in the cloud. So we were going to get someone to test that, but I'll just quickly show you. So Jonas, are you sharing your cloud?
It's your vMix instance.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. So, just real simple. I can just hit the cut bus and you can easily see that it's cutting back and forwards between the two. I can hit bug, the bug will come up. I can hit lower third, and this is all real time, and this is all via VPN. So super slick, super simple. And the use case here is that, a perfect example is a few weeks ago, we had a live stream and I've got my kids virtual schooling, so I had to take care of them. So I just went on to the comms line. I said, Ryan, can you take over? So he goes, sure, no problem. So he started punching the buttons. I came back a couple of minutes later, and then I just took over. So, you can, at a very low cost, have multiple operators running in the cloud. So we have one person that's generally controlling vMix, just the switching. We have another person in larger shows doing things like play out. So if you've got lower thirds or videos, prepping that kind of material. We could also have another person that's controlling sound, for instance. And Teradici will only do one login. However, with something like Parsec or even TeamViewer, you can have multiple people in there. So we have all our people on Parsec, multiple machines, and we can do that. So another fun thing that I do want to show you that Jonas and I have been working on over the last week. Let me pull that up real quick. And Mickey, if possible, could you please spotlight my screen here, as well as Jonas's. Okay, so what you see here is something that we've been playing around with. This is Node-RED, and I know there's a few people, in office hours that have been talking about this. So Jonas and I thought we would play around with this to see if we could do anything fun with it. So what you see here is these buttons are mapping to my cloud instance. So this is using Companion. We have master volume and zoom input sliders here. And we also have some monitoring information on the right. So as you can see, we have recording, streaming, what's actually showing in preview and program. And then I can also show information about instances that are running in the cloud. So I can do all sorts of monitoring tools here. So, so Jonas has access to this. So Jonas, if you could please play a lower third.
Should be playing right now.
There we go. So the great thing about this is, this could be an alternate. So if someone doesn't have a Stream Deck, for instance, and you want someone that's monitoring an instance, they could potentially have a web page like this, which is all secure behind a firewall and everything. They could log on and monitor things like this. So
just so you know, I'm monitoring YouTube and I'm seeing only the control panel. I'm not seeing the 2-up display going out to the to YouTube.
Okay. So we will have to we'll just switch between the two. So basically with this, another use case would be that someone is just a producer and they want to see what's actually happening in the program. So they can easily see, well, recording hasn't started. So Jonas, could you please hit record in vMix? So if Jonas hits record.
I don't think I have access via Parsec.
You don't have access?
Now.
Okay, so let me quickly do that. So I can easily hit record over here. And then within about 5 seconds, this will change to true. So this is all real time, and this is all just code behind the scenes. But basically with this kind of interface, you could program anything. You can program an ATEM Mini. You could do Zoom OSC through Node-RED, and there's a whole bunch of stuff. And the other cool thing is, so Jonas, if you are able to use your Korg, if you could change those sliders.
I have a Korg right here, and we basically build a small website. So if you look at the lower right screen and I pull that fader up, you see that the fader actually is mapped to the volume fader in vMix. And I can pull it down. And that works completely remotely via the web browser.
Yeah.
And you guys wrote all this in the last week, right? This is all This is all new from scratch. Yeah. This is what you guys are seeing is just based out of necessity. We're trying to figure out how to do this so that we can help people do this in a browser with a multi-viewer and cut in the cloud without being there, and then pass. If you have comms, you can pass that to somebody else. Like Jared was saying, it's amazing what you can do up there.
And the cool part is we have it secured away with Cloudflare, so that if you would go to the IP or to the domain you see right now, you would need to register, and we can set up who is enabled to see our stuff.
Hey, Guy, to your comms conversation and Jared, I mean, obviously you're saying, hey, Mickey, do this for me, but you're doing it live. I'm assuming you're on a Unity comms concept, doing all of that conversation in back channel?
Yes.
Copy that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yes. Yep. And
but Guy, to your point, there is no of course. We're making this stuff as we go along, so I need to know.
And I think YouTube is pinned again. Oh, now it just switched to it was pinned on the controller for a while.
Okay, great. So, and the other thing that we have done here, and just to show you ease of use and multiple people operating this here on the left-hand side that you see, the lower thirds, this is actually using a data source, which is just a Google Sheet. So we can have multiple people in there editing and then, changing through editing. So just this morning, Jonas created another lower third called Fish, and we can just play that out. So any of our operators anywhere around the world could potentially play that out without any issue via a web browser, via Companion, if they have Korg or if they're inside vMix. So multiple options at a very, very low budget.
And update those data sources by using a shared concept, which is something we do, and it works phenomenally. So much easier.
Oh, and one last thing. I noticed.
I'm just waiting. I'm waiting to jump in and say what we got. We got a couple questions stacking up. So.
Yep. No. I was just want to quickly add that it's actually Greg Gibson's birthday today.
Next question. First question.
Moving in, it's Greg Gibson in Washington, D.C., who's in with our first question. And it says, is the Teradici annual license server-side or client-side? That is, can I use a single user license on my client to access multiple Teradici instances, or do I need a license for each instance?
It's server-side. It is based off the server itself. Now, you supposedly can move those around. I have multiple licenses. I have lost track of where they are installed, so I haven't come across that just yet, because I'm still, a lot of times I'll just spin up the Teradici AMI anyway, and that is tied to, I believe that AMI is tied in with if you buy the subscription from Teradici through Amazon. Otherwise, if you buy it from, like I did, like from Dell, they just sent me a code and I have 5 installs of it at that point.
Next question.
Georgie Kennedy Jr., Washington, D.C. Jeff, how much storage should we assign to the new AWS instances with records in mind?
I meant records.
Yeah, I understand what you're asking. Depends on how long of events you're doing. I recently did this thing where we were recording 12, and I think I used dual 900s. So I used an instance that had the 900 gigabyte, pretty sure is what yeah, I think it was only a 900 gigabyte. So it wasn't like super large, but it was plenty to do an hour and a half record of 12 sources at one time. So just
I'm gonna be quick. I know we stretch for time. So I guess this gets back to the question, because you get 30 gigs. Normally I'll do 100 gigs, but once we addressed this before, once you go up, let's say you establish 500 gigs, you can't take that back down to 30. So when you put that instance to sleep, you still be in charge for that part of that 500 gigs.
That is correct. That is correct. And so that's why I use that infernal storage, that extra storage. That's what we use to do the recordings, which is 225. So, and then the other option is you could link an S3 bucket, and an S3 bucket, believe me or not, it is fast enough most of the time to be able to record directly to that bucket. You just test, lots of testing.
Next question.
Bill Hobbs in San Jose says, I might have missed it, but for an AWS contribution machine for Zoom running 2 screens, gallery and active speaker, what AWS instance is sufficient?
Good guy.
Yeah, I'll say that the 2x, Jeff was saying that he's had some instances where he's moving people around where it wasn't powerful enough. I know Churig uses just the regular baseline one for his. And then Greg Gibson's doing Zoom rooms where he's pinning, I believe, 3 people across. So on mine, I haven't done that yet, where that workflow can be really nice if you want to get like 12 people, 12 up. So you'd probably want to do Zoom rooms, and I believe you can do three screens, and one of them might have a little bit of gunk that you have to crop off. But for the most part, you should be able to get 3 out of each Zoom room.
Next question.
John Preto in Las Vegas says, panelists, have you heard of anyone building out SMTP 2110 based cloud infrastructures?
No,
haven't heard about
not
that
really.
Yet. It's coming. I know people are talking about it. I just haven't seen it yet. Next question.
The CDI is the predecessor to tying all that together. They're headed that route for sure.
Okay, Shane Foley in Ashland, Oregon, up next with Chirag. Well, a while back you mentioned that you usually ingest guests over Zoom instead of vMix call. What's behind that decision? Is it because Zoom gives you more than 4 guests, or is it guest familiarity with Zoom's UI, or some other reason? Thanks.
So the answer to that is both. Everyone is basically familiar with Zoom, so we've gone with that platform. Another reason is because there's a limit of 8 callers within vMix call. We generally, if we have a show of 4 or 5 people, we generally have all their support staff as well, and then all of our support staff. So we may have 10, 15 people on a Zoom call. So for that reason, we choose to use Zoom versus vMix call.
Okay. Bill Hops of San Jose says, Chirag, are you running BitFocus Companion on your local network with remote operators connected via VPN, or all on an AWS instance?
So we have a local version. So everyone has Companion locally, and we VPN into our Companion in the cloud. And using that VPN, we can actually control. So all of our buttons in the cloud are connected to the same button. So 1.1 is connected to 1.1 on the local. When you push that, it does that operation.
And the last question in this grouping, Mark Harder says from Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn, in case no one mentions it, the demo actually inspires the word awesome. Thank you all so much for admitting that some of that was written this week, and for sharing your real world examples. So it's Mark, just sending you all a compliment. Great job, guys.
Wow, we made it. I thought we were going to be pressed for time and go 5 over. I was going to ask for 5.
we were moving fast. Well, the thing is that when you really are just talking about something specific, we can burn through a lot of questions pretty quickly and get a lot of information out of there. Where do you guys see the next steps of where you're going with this? Go ahead, Jeff.
I did forget one thing that I need to bring out specifically for Greg. Greg Gibson and I have been talking about, and this is something that came up. So let me switch over real quick. This is specifically for him whenever you don't have enough buttons on your desk. This is a foot pedal with 3 buttons. So that way you could switch between your inputs with your feet or whatever you want to switch with that. And this is just a simple little USB thing I found on Amazon. And believe it or not, Greg, it does work well. My guys were using it because they were using Xbox controllers for cameras. And so they were switching the cameras with their feet over that. And sorry, back to that. I just didn't want to forget to show Greg because I promised him I would show that.
If you're an ex-pipe organist, could you get 4 of those and put them under your desk?
Yeah, you can put as many as you want under it. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, but it does work well.
But that's a good question. How are you physically bridging them into the USB bridge? Or
Yeah,
something?
it's a USB input, and so the USB plugs into your. It just plugs into your computer, and you assign it a keyboard shortcut. And I asked Joe about tying it into central control, and he goes, "Yeah, no problem. Just send me." It uses the PID basically that comes up in Windows, and he can link it up to that. And so he can use that, and then you can
give them
trigger
pet
anything.
names like Fred, George, Bob, and Alex or something. I mean, okay, I would assume you'd have to like A, B, C, D.
Yeah, whatever you want to do.
That. Wow.
Now I also use Xkeys has a and I wanted to show it, and I went off and forgot it at the shop when I left last night. But it's a little small box about like this big, and then you use external buttons that are just contact closures into the box, and then you can just litter your desk around with or your floor or whatever you wanted to, or the wall, whatever, and then just hit the buttons to where you need it, and those buttons are all programmed to whatever action you want it to be.
And haven't band or guitarists been doing this for decades?
Usually
with, their foot
with
pedals?
MIDI. Usually
Okay.
with MIDI.
Copy that.
Go ahead, Chris.
You know, talk about all this remote control. It's really amazing. It's so astounding what you guys are doing. In the old days of sitting in like production trucks, I would take, you know, the switcher buttons, and because I couldn't build my old user interface, there's certain buttons you just didn't want to press, and I would modify them with a little piece of tape and a pin so I wouldn't accidentally hit the wrong button. And so the fact that you guys get to build your own the fact that you guys get to build your own user interface is really cool.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, that's that pretty amazing 4 weeks. Go ahead, George, you had a couple last words.
Just a quick last words. As video guys, we always talk about ourselves because a lot of us have been in video for over 25, 30 years. Greg Gibson, who probably I don't know if he's shy, but who's a photographer that jumped into this a year ago. And if you look at his work, it's really impressive. So it's a testament for what he's doing, that you don't need to know everything, but if you learn a little bit, you can really explode and do what you need to get done.
Yeah, I think he's done something like 200 events from zero. Like we need to get Greg on for a second hour to talk about how that happened. So that'd be really interesting. All right, thanks everybody. We're going to jump into the post show. Great work, Jeff, Guy, Chirag, Tucker, who's not here. Amazing, like so much work. I mean, it's just so clean. This is like a whole nother step of what we're hoping to do for second hours, and you guys really just knocked it out of the park. So just thank you so much for the effort. I know it wasn't something you just pulled. Well, I'll just do this thing on Friday. So I really appreciate the hard work that you guys put into it. It's amazing, and I think a lot of us are there'll be a whole bunch of things that I think happen after this that are all based on these 4 weeks. So thanks so much. And great work for to our producers that were watching, asking questions, voting questions up and down. Great work there, and great job as always to the panel. I think that the panel is getting tighter. You know, like I think our questions are getting more, our answers are getting more focused. We're starting to, kind of just pepper, the answers there. So I think that it's having the show run even faster than it was before. So great work. And now we're going to jump into the post show. We'll see you then.